You're listening to the She Lift Project podcast, a show dedicated to helping women achieve higher levels of success in the workplace. No matter where you are in your career, we want to help you grow. Now here's your host, Cynthia Kirkpatrick, a CPA, CFP, and Senior Financial Advisor at Moneta Group.
Welcome to another episode of the She Lift Project podcast. I'm Cynthia Kirkpatrick. Thanks for joining us today from wherever you are. Happy to have Dr. Leslie Davis, Dr. D, as I've come to know, a little bit of fun that we've had and we're going to have today. She's the owner of Eva Empowered, owner, founder, and award-winning relationship therapist, international speaker, best-selling author. Essentially, what stuck out to me was empowering women to heal from toxic relationships. Yes. And increasing self-worth, walking in freedom by knowing the truth. Wow. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Powerful words, and I'm sure powerful work that you're doing to help people know themselves, feel empowered, and carry that into real relationships.
Yes, I am so excited that I was chosen for this work. I feel like it's my life's ministry. I don't feel like it is a job. It's just something that I enjoy doing because it's part of who I am. And I've been helping people with relationships since I was a teenage girl. So to get to this space now where I'm a grown woman and I'm able to kind of see the brokenness in other women where I've been there myself, I know what it feels like, I know what it looks like, and I want to help them heal the way that I was able to heal. It's just an amazing opportunity.
You just, I think, laid out everything we're probably going to be talking about in this next hour. But oftentimes we find it's best just to quickly, or I shouldn't say quickly, but maybe highlight first, what is it that you're doing today? You've got Eva Empowered and you're on social media. You're out there every week, I'm sure giving great tools, tips, feedback. But what is it that you're doing day to day helping people?
Oh my goodness, I do so much. And when people ask me, how do I do all the things I do? I have no idea. I just do what I'm supposed to do, I guess. But one of my main things that I do is I am a relationship therapist. So I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor, and I'm licensed in both Illinois and Missouri. And so my primary clients are mostly teens or couples. I work with single women, but I mostly work with high achieving women that struggle in their relationships. So if you've ever seen Scandal, if you know Olivia Pope, the main character on that show, there are many women that resemble her. So they're high achieving in their jobs. They have great friendships. They have all the success in the world, but they just really struggle with romantic relationships for different reasons. Most women that I work with have a lot of trauma in their history, and they don't recognize that what they've experienced is trauma. And so my job as a therapist is to help them recognize it so they can heal themselves and then eventually find the love that they've been looking for. That's just one of the roles that I play. Another role, so through Eva Empowered, I initially started out branching out as She Matters, which was part of my dissertation work to get my PhD. I created a podcast called She Matters with Dr. Leslie Davis. And the goal of that was to create podcast episodes that would last forever for a single mom that's struggling in her relationships, whether it be with a friend, family, or romantic partner, because that's just the life of a single mom. Sometimes we struggle. I'm a single mom. I know what that's like. I've been there. It's hard. And a lot of times it's a lonely experience. And so I wanted to create something that could help other single moms with a free resource if they couldn't go to therapy, or if they didn't have any friends, or they didn't have any family members that they could trust to tell their story to. They have a space that they can hear someone else who's been through it and get the help that they need. And so through She Matters, I branched that out to make that a global movement to bring awareness to the struggles of single moms around the world, because we struggle with emotions, we struggle with mental health, and a lot of people aren't talking about that. And I want to highlight a really special story, and it's something that just happened. I think the anniversary is coming up in a few weeks, if I haven't already missed it. But there was a young lady in Springfield, Illinois, that was having mental health struggles, and she was also a single mother. And she was in the middle of a mental health crisis, but it was unrecognized, and she was shot and killed by the police, unfortunately. And I think that story could have been any single mom in the world. There's a new movie that just came out on Netflix. I can't remember the name of it, but watching that story that was made by Tyler Perry, could have been that mom struggling with mental health. I could have been the mom that struggled not having support. I was a single mom at the age of 22, and growing up, I had lots of people in my life, but I didn't feel safe to tell them what I was really feeling. So there were days when I was depressed. There were days when I cried by myself, and I had to hide that part of me, even from my child, because I had to stay strong. And being a strong Black woman is something that, we're encouraged to be as Black women. And so I had to hide parts of myself that hurt. I had to hide my pain. And I know that there are other single moms, no matter what their race is or their ethnic background or their class, we all have the same struggle because it's a lonely experience raising a child by yourself. And so watching that movie, it just reminded me that that could have been me. That could have been me, a successful single mom that could have had a mental breakdown at any point because of all the stressors in life. And in that movie, the lady lost her child, but I could have lost my child. Any of us could have lost our child at any point. We could have lost anything major. We could have lost our jobs. We could have lost housing. And I know that is the experience of a lot of single moms. But just knowing that I'm in this world to use my own experience to help someone else. And so that's part of what I do. That's part of why I'm here, is to use my life as an example that can show people, hey, you can do it. You can do whatever you want if you put your mind to it and you find the right support.
Yeah, that support is huge. And the ability at some point to put your hand up, out, et cetera, and say you need that help in that struggle that you're going through. It's really hard to get over that hump. Sometimes it's even hard to acknowledge it or recognize it.
Absolutely. And one of my hot topics as a therapist lately and some of my speaking engagements, I love talking about self-silencing and self-silencing among women. And this is not just about single moms here, okay? This is women across the world that struggle with self-silencing. And what that means is when we need to speak up for ourselves, whether it's advocating for ourselves or we need to speak up in a sense of just saying how we feel about something or just telling the truth about our pain, in those moments, we revert back to being quiet, keeping it inside. I'm going to make you cry. I have that effect on people. I'm sorry.
No, I want you to keep talking because this is so hitting home, and I'm sure it's going to hit home for so many people out there.
Yeah. And I think women that they don't have healthy connections will deal with self-silencing more often. And there's research backed by this that talks about self-silencing among women specifically and how that leads to depression, and it can lead to suicidal thoughts, and it can lead to someone choosing to end their life because it's just too much. And so one of my personal goals right now is to help women recognize when they are doing that so they can stop that behavior, but also to recognize, where do you have healthy relationships in your life so you can speak freely and say what is on your heart and say what hurts? Because sometimes, and you may have found this for yourself, sometimes when we share our pain, we can connect with other people. And that's really what the goal is healthy connection. So we can connect with someone that can say, you know what, me too. That happened to me too. But we will never know that if we don't share our pain, if we don't talk about what's hurting us, if we don't talk about how we've overcome certain things. And so self-silencing is so damaging. So I want to stop it.
So I'm going to ask you maybe why you think this happens, especially for women. And I wonder if it's worse for moms than non-moms. I think as a mom, a professional working mom, it's even happened to me recently, even thinking about things that I may or may not want from or with or to say to my kids. And I think, well, you're the mom. You must sacrifice. You must be there for them. So, how much do you ask from them or bring your emotional need or question to them? You're the mom, be strong for them. I'm not sure if I'm saying it clearly, but again, what is it, or how do we get to that point where we are self-silencing? And if we can know why, maybe we can then figure out how to not do it, stop it.
Yeah, there's a few factors that I think it affects different people in different situations. But the first thing that comes to mind is just society's message to us as women that we're supposed to be quiet. We're supposed to be compliant. We're supposed to just be pretty and do whatever we're asked to do because we're nurturers. And so as a nurturer, we're supposed to give and give and give. And when we get into that space of giving so much, we forget to give to ourselves. And we forget to look at ourselves and look at how do we feel? What do we think? Because we're always trying to make sure everybody else around us is comfortable. And when you get into that routine of making sure everybody else is okay and you're not filling your own cup, then you're empty. And I think at that point, if it goes on for too long, that's where silencing happens naturally, where you have no words for yourself because you've given it to everyone else. Does that make sense?
It does. And I know when we're done with this podcast, my husband's probably going to be like, did you listen to that? Did you hear that? Did she,
Yeah, that's one thing that comes to mind. But I also think, there are women and young girls, there are women who experience violence or abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, and they're not allowed to tell their stories. They have to stay quiet to keep themselves safe. That's a whole nother level of self-silencing where you have to stay silent for your own safety. But at the same time, if they never break their silence, they may never get the help they need. They may never get the way of escape that they need. And so that's another big part of my heart is to help victims of domestic violence to recognize when is the right time for you to open your mouth and get the help that you need to speak up and stand up for yourself, because we can't go through emotional abuse forever. That will break someone down. And you may have seen a woman in your life at some point. And as I look back at this, there are women that I've come across that maybe I've seen at church or I've seen in a school setting that now that I know the signs, they were probably self-silencing because they had other things going on at home and they couldn't talk and they were invisible. We get to the point of self-silencing that we are invisible to other people. So it's not about self-silencing because we're meeting other people's needs. We don't know how to meet our own needs. It doesn't feel safe to do that. And so we quiet ourselves to the point where we are just this big now. We're so small. And we stay small to stay safe.
Yeah, if we're not talking, if we're not putting ourselves out there, if we're smaller, then maybe we're less likely to get hurt.
Yes, absolutely.
We're less seen, less likely to get hurt.
Yeah. And it's sad that it has to be that way.
Right.
But getting into my love for Jiu-Jitsu.
I know she's sitting here, for those who might be listening, through a podcast or, radio or whatever, not watching YouTube, she's got some guns. She's into Jiu-Jitsu. We were talking ahead of time that if we get out of line, she can throw down some moves and keep us in line.
Yeah. And I started my jiu-jitsu journey. It's been almost 9 years. And the reason I started that year, I think it was 2017 or 18, but I choose a word for the year. And that year, my word was strength. And I said, what can I do that will strengthen me, mind, body, and spirit? And I've always loved martial arts. And I've heard about jiu-jitsu. I've seen it. I used to watch UFC and I'm like, well, let me try it. And I went to my first class and I was hooked. And I have not stopped training since. And I think I will probably train jiu-jitsu for the rest of my life. And I know I look younger than what I am. I'm in my mid-40s. And I think jiu-jitsu actually helps me in all areas. Like, it keeps me healthy. It keeps my mental health on point. People ask me as a therapist, do I have a therapist? And I say jiu-jitsu is my therapy. But I think for women who self-silence, jiu-jitsu is the perfect martial art to train, because you learn how to defend yourself. You learn how to recognize danger. You learn how to pay attention to your own body, because if you can't pay attention to your own body and be aware of what hurts, then you're going to be broken, literally, in jiu-jitsu. And I think that martial art is just, it's perfect for young girls. It's perfect, little girls even. As soon as they can crawl, get them on the mat, you know. But I know for sure, because of the stories that I've heard and from my own experience, Jiu-Jitsu is perfect for women who struggle with domestic violence and for any type of abuse. And yes, there are stories, and if you're part of the Jiu-Jitsu world listening, there are recent allegations from different gyms of women being sexually abused in Jiu-Jitsu gyms, or coaches just taking advantage of women. But that is another reason why we need to get into self-silencing. And why are we self-silencing? Why can't we speak up for ourselves? Why can't we join together as women and empower each other in those spaces so we don't have to self-silence anymore?
Yeah, and I think what we're finding, you know, I feel like we have evolved over the last 100 years to not be able to have jobs, to getting jobs when the men are at war, to, you know, even just this morning we had another episode where, you know, the founder of Build-A-Bear the banks wouldn't lend to her when she was starting Build-A-Bear. You know, she'd been president of Payless shoe store and couldn't even get. So we've definitely evolved a lot. And I think we're in this space where women are realizing the power to support each other and to reach out to each other. It's probably still early on-ish in that phase, but there is, if we can nurture kids, nurture others, we can certainly nurture each other.
Absolutely. And like you said, like, it's very rare to see other women supporting other women. And I think what you're doing here with your podcast it's so huge. I don't think people realize how big of an impact this can be for women around the world. So I want to thank you for doing what you do, amplifying the voices of other women, not just successful women, but just women, and sharing their personal stories, because that's where connection happens. And when we have healthy connection, we can build and we can grow and help each other grow. And I've come across a few local groups. I think one is called WOO, Women Empower Women. And there's the different branches across different states. And that space it's something I probably never would have stepped into until this past year. So in the past year, I became an entrepreneur, going to private practice as a therapist. And as an entrepreneur, most women, if you've been doing that, you recognize it is a lonely experience. You know, you're doing everything on your own. And as an entrepreneur, you learn over time, you can't do it all on your own. You need support. But where are you going to get that support if you don't step out and choose to connect with people? And you have to choose to connect with people that are sometimes doing better than you. And so you have to check your ego in those moments. Am I not reaching out to the next woman because I think she's prettier than me or she's more successful, and it's stopping me from my own blessing? But what I found out, because I'm also a mentor to some girls or to upcoming therapists, you can get to a space where you're looking for help, you're looking for that support, and you might be helping someone else just because you're giving information that you have that can help them get better. And that also feeds you at the same time.
Right. And you learn it better when you teach it.
Absolutely.
Also.
Yeah. I think teaching, and I never wanted to call myself a teacher, but everyone says I should be a professor. But I think there are different ways to teach. And sometimes you're teaching by modeling or mentoring or just encouraging sometimes. I think that is part of teaching as well. It's not necessarily like a script to teaching. And if you have a moment to share, you know, not silencing yourself, I think that's one of the most impactful things you can do. I think there are so many people, if they look back at their own life and what sparked their purpose or sparked their interest in something, it's because someone planted a seed with a word and they took it and ran with it. And in moments when they're feeling unsure of themselves or confused, they will go back to that word that was given to them. And a lot of times it was a teacher or it was a coach or someone that was in a somewhat of a teaching role. And I like to think of what women in my life said something that sparked me, that gave me purpose or reminded me of what my purpose is.
Well, you know, I'm going to ask, what was that word, or what were those words that...
Oh, goodness.
Or who was it that looking back, or you can go back to and say, oh, that's right, so-and-so, you know.
There's so many people that come to mind, but I will say the most impactful person is Dr. Debbie Turner. And she was Miss America in the 90s. And she was on a show here in St. Louis when I was growing up. And I remember she used to take me to some of her events, and I would just be sitting there. I didn't know what I was doing there with her. I was like, I'm just riding along with Debbie Turner. You know, she's pretty. She's a cool person. But I remember looking back now, I remember watching her and how poised she was and how she was able to speak to anyone. It didn't matter what they looked like or what their background was, and how encouraging she was to people. And she was always giving of herself in that way. And I remember her giving to me, you know, there's a scripture in Esther, which I actually have on my tattoo, Esther 4:14, for such a time as this. And those words have stuck with me throughout my life since I was a teenage girl. And I think that's when I found my purpose in counseling for such a time as this, because I've noticed there are so many moments where I know I'm in my purpose. Like I can feel it all over me. I get this warm sensation. I get a smile on my face. And sometimes the words that come out of my mouth, I don't even know what I'm saying, but it's impacting the person that I'm speaking to. And I look back, I'm like, wow, that was the moment for such a time as this. So
when did you know that this is what you should be doing, counseling, helping others in relationships?
At the age of 13.
That was pretty like definitive.
For sure.
What happened or what stands out that it was like age 13, I knew it.
You know, there's so little pockets of moments that come together and you're like, yeah, that's it. But there was a conversation I had with a classmate at 13. And I remember he was dealing with a girl, you know, he was trying to break up with her, and he asked me for some advice. And I told him, I don't remember what I said, but I gave him some advice about a relationship at 13, so 7th grade. And he's like, you should be a shrink. I was like, what is that? He's like, you know, when people come and talk to you, they lay on the couch and they tell you, I'm like, oh, I could do that. I can make money doing that. Okay. But I didn't look at it as something to do to make money. I was like, I just like to talk to people. I like to help them. And then I started noticing, even at the age of 13, adults were asking me for relationship advice. I'm like, how are you asking me? I don't know. I'm 13. But it was those many moments where it's like the words just came out of my mouth. They just flowed through me for such a time as this, right? It was that moment that I impacted someone at the age of 13 where I was like, I feel like this is what I'm supposed to do. And I started studying relationships. I remember watching movies and looking at them from a different perspective, or I would read books about relationships and marriage. And I would listen to, there was a radio show at the time that talked about relationships, and I would just listen to it all the time. I wasn't supposed to be listening to it at that age, but I was fascinated by it. And I was also interested because I grew up in a single parent home. It was just me and my mother growing up. So I didn't know what marriage looked like. I never experienced it. I never had a man in the house. I didn't know how to interact with a man, right? And so as I'm getting older and I want my own relationship, I had to study, how do I become a wife? How do I become a good girlfriend? Or what do, you know, male and female dynamics look like that are healthy? Because I had never seen it before. So I had to teach myself. And in that learning process, I was able to give back to others who I could recognize that they weren't doing it in a healthy way because I had studied it so much. I'm like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. And that helped me navigate into actually becoming a relationship therapist. You know, as a therapist, you don't start out exactly knowing your niche, right? You just go to school, you get your degree, you get your license. You might have an idea that you want to work with kids or adults, but we rarely see like the specifics that we want to work with. But I knew very early I want to deal with relationships.
Is life hard for you to go out in the world and see a bad relationship?
No, not at all.
And want to help.
I am very transparent. I tell people all the time, I'm never sugarcoated. So if you ask my opinion, I'm going to tell you straight up, this is what I'm thinking. You probably need to leave that person alone, or this is what you need to work on. I will point out the red flags for you in a heartbeat. But I'm also known for when I see that two people are supposed to be together, I can just kind of feel it, and I can see the characteristics that just line up. And I will let them know, I think you should talk to that person. And so I've actually had two couples that I put together that got married. And one of them we just celebrated this past weekend. Yeah, one of my friends.
All right.
Yeah.
So you go from 13 to being young, listening to radio shows, which probably for 20-something-year-olds that I don't even know if they're listening to this, that would be foreign. But for something in their 40s, like I remember, my parents always having KMOX or different radio shows on where they were listening to experts talk about different things versus just music or whatever. And then, graduating high school, going to college, getting your doctorate, all of that to study relationships.
Yeah.
And to help people with relationships.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey for sure.
Is, think about that sort of specialty niche. Is that newer versus, being a child therapist or is studying relationships, spending so much time on that? Is that newer or not? Has it been around forever?
I think the title of relationship therapist might be something newer. Most people that want to work with couples, they might say they're a couples therapist, or they might go into marriage and family therapy. But dealing with relationships, to me, my opinion on that is, I don't only want to work with couples because relationships impact everyone. There could be a teenager that comes in my office that's struggling in their relationship with their best friend or with their parents, and I'm helping them with their relationship. Or it could be a mom and their child, the adult child. I've had requests for people that come in that they're two best friends that just need some, navigating their relationship dynamics because something happened in the friendship and they don't want to lose that person. And so they're like, I need some help. I'm losing my best friend. So it's not always about romantic relationships where a relationship therapist can help the person.
And I love that because I think there's so many relationships just beyond that romantic relationship, right? Like you said, friendships, relationships at work, whether it's, with your boss or not, or teamwork. I mean, almost everything is some sort of relationship, even if it's just a quick interaction on the fly. Why it feels like relationships are harder and more complicated than they used to be. Ooh. One, is that true? if it is, why?
Oh, there's so many reasons. Well, I'll start with the pandemic. Okay, so 2020 shifted everything for everybody. And I think relationships took a hit because we were forced to be with each other where we didn't have an escape. And if you are used to regular dynamics of we start our day together, you go here, or one might stay home, or you both are leaving, and then you come back together, you had a break in between. And during the pandemic, no one had a break from each other. And so that shifted relationship dynamics. There was a rise in domestic violence cases during that time. There was a rise in divorce, or at least the idea of divorce during that time. But I think another factor that impacts the change, we just don't have the same ideas of what roles are anymore. And I think people are more open to like, who am I? Who do I want to be today? And can that change tomorrow? And I think the openness of identity has changed a lot for relationships. So there are people who are navigating, I'm married to a man, but you know what? I might like girls now, so I want to get married to someone else. Or I've also dealt with couples that are same-sex couples that one of them is changing their gender identity, right? And they no longer want to be female. Let's say it's two female partners. One no longer wants to be identified as a female or a she, her. And so that change impacts their relationship because now the person that is attracted to a female has to now be in a relationship with a male presenting person. That changes everything. Right? You still love the person, but that person is no longer the same person that they met. And that happens in, opposite sex relationships as well. As, you change as an individual, and sometimes you can't explain why you're changing or what the change is. You just know something's transforming. And that impacts the relationship over time, which is why we see divorce happen at different pockets of life. I think as people get older, like, I don't like you anymore. I thought I did. Or you're not who I thought you were now that we're married. So relationships change because dynamics change all the time. We're always evolving. But if we go into a relationship knowing that we're always evolving, and if you focus more on, I'm choosing this person no matter who you are because I love you, then you can navigate that a little bit better.
That sounds hard to do.
It is hard. And no one wants to be like doing the hard work. Nobody wants to do that. Or they don't know how, which is why they come to therapy.
I would say I think it's hard work, and I think a lot of it too is we don't know how to, I think children, right? We, depending on how we're raised in schools and all of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're a lot of the fun and the play and the curiosity is sort of worn out of us.
Mm-hmm.
And, may even be like, but this is my favorite, I saved this cookie to have it. Yeah, but your best friend's over, right? You just give your best friend that,
Mm-hmm.
we don't want to deal with, or we don't know how to teach our children to deal with the confrontation. So they grow up not knowing how to deal with it. And so then we have relationships that aren't truly deeply real.
Yeah.
We self-silence
Mm-hmm.
or whatever it might be. And we're not getting at what's truly underneath. And because we don't know how, and it's hard because we don't know how,
Mm-hmm.
or many other reasons.
I think traditional couples and traditional families, they were raised because that's what they saw their parents do, is you don't argue in front of the kids. You make everything look like it's perfect in front of the children so they have a happy life. And so if that's the case, over time, children who become adults don't know how to argue healthy. Like, they're arguing is not necessarily a bad thing. We have to be able to say what we feel, what we think, and just say, hey, you know what? I don't agree with you. This is what I feel, what I think, what I need. But let's find some common ground and respect each other. But if we never model that for children, they don't know how to do it with their friends. They don't know how to do it on the playground. They don't know how to do it with their teachers. Sometimes I think dealing with teens, I've heard stories of how teens are standing up for themselves because they have been empowered over the last few years. They're now finding their voice. And at that age of life, like, they're supposed to be doing that. They're supposed to find out who they are and speak up for themselves. But the adults in their life, parents, teachers, principals, the police, they don't want to feel disrespected by a teenager. And so they're not allowed to talk. But they're like, no, I'm going to say what I want to say. And that's seen as disrespect. And I think that shows up in other types of relationships too. If I say what I have to say, the other person receives that as disrespect, and it's not the same.
What I've been trying to listen more to, if there's something I want to bring up, or what could be perceived as part of a difficult conversation. Like, I think I watched a video from Simon Sinek recently where he talked about all of this. I should go back to that because I don't remember it all. But, how do you lean into that difficult conversation? I think he said something like, there's something challenging, a difficult something like, I want to talk to you about something that's difficult for me.
Mm-hmm.
Is now a good time? Or, I think even just knowing how to enter one of those difficult conversations would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Having a difficult conversation it takes skill, I would say. Lots of skill and lots of practice, because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for you as a person that needs to share, and it's uncomfortable for the person that has to sit there and listen and not defend themselves while they're listening. And I think you kind of mentioned it, like, the timing is a factor. So we have to enter that conversation with asking them, hey, is this a good time to talk about whatever the subject is? And if it's not, well, let's schedule some time. And sometimes it's better to schedule time to talk to someone so they can have a heads up, or they can prepare themselves, or they can say, you know what, I have a lot going on. I wouldn't even be able to hear you anyway. So let's meet at another time. Location is important. So if you need to have a difficult conversation, depending on who it is, who it's with, maybe it's better to do it in public, because that will keep you more aware of yourself and you're not getting loud most likely you're not going to get loud in public. If you do, someone's going to say something. And it may not be, if you're in the home, it may not be the best thing to do it in the bedroom. That's where you're supposed to sleep and rest. So maybe go outside or take a walk together. There are different things you can do to open the door for that difficult conversation. But the person that needs to say what they need to say, maybe helping them would be like practicing. So practicing, what do you want to say before you meet with this person? Maybe jot down, 2 or 3 key points that you want to make sure you get out and put it on your phone if you need to. It's okay to refer to notes. I think we're used to having just natural conversation, natural dialogue that we forget. Well, we can prepare for dialogue, and feeling more prepared will help you have a better conversation. But the person who's listening has to be prepared to just kind of be still and listen and ask questions for clarification, not necessarily questions to combat what's being said. And that can be hard because we're not taught how to listen well either, right? We're not taught how to speak up for ourselves, and we're not taught how to listen. So I think communication in general is just something we all need to be better at.
Yeah, I think back to, I mean, my kids are a little bit older, but even still, like some of these basic skills of, whether it's debate or speaking up for yourself, self-advocacy. Mm-hmm. I think the schools have definitely gotten a little bit better about it than when I was in school. But, should we be teaching some of these skills?
Absolutely.
Even better? Some of these experts, like you said, having them practice earlier on. I mean, I know even, especially my 16-year-old, she's way better at some things than I am. And I'm kind of in awe because, as you said, they're doing a better job, I think, of really trying to empower the kids.
Yeah.
It's just, it's hard being the older person trying to retrain neural pathways in my brain.
Yes. I think these kids they're so much better than we were at emotional intelligence because they know what that means. They've heard that word, and this is new language to us as adults. And being allowed to say what you feel is hard, especially if you can't identify what you feel. And teens that I work with, they are telling me what their parents are struggling with. Like, my mom needs to do this because she needs emotional intelligence. They're using this language in therapy. And I'm like, how do you know this? How do you know? But they're being exposed to it everywhere. Like, social media is such a powerful tool. And if they find the right person, and I'm always leery about social media with mental health resources because some people that are putting out that information are not really therapists, or they're not licensed, or they don't have the credentials that they really need to put out proper information. But these kids are just eating it up, and they're running with it, and they're using it everywhere. And they're using it in situations where they're not getting along with their family. And they think they can help their family, but their family doesn't want to listen to them. So it's a struggle.
Yeah, I think if you're in your mid-40s, I'm 47, I'll be 48. So I'm Gen X. I'm on the tail end-ish of Gen X.
Okay.
But I think the joke is always Gen X emotions. What are those? we were growing up, we grew up where it was like, you don't have emotions, don't,
That's right.
whatever. And I think a hard part of what we go through is even identifying the correct, like, what is the real emotion? Like, you're angry, but what's underneath that anger? Is it hurt?
Yeah.
Is it embarrassment?
Yeah.
Is it, frustration? Like, what's really underneath? I know at some point I had printed out like a wheel of emotions. Probably need to go back to that because I'm sure sometimes you just stay on the surface level and the real issue problem is way underneath.
There's a new app I just came across. I can't remember what it's called. I just remember what it looks like. But it helps you identify your feeling, your emotion. And the way it does is, it'll ask you like, what's going on with your day? And you have a option, and it's color coded. And the cool thing about it is if you use it regularly, you'll start to see patterns of your emotions at different times of day or with different situations. So to ask you, what's going on right now? Do you feel this? And when you click on the emotion, it'll describe what that is, and you can decide, yeah, that's it, or no, it's not quite that, and it'll give you another option so you can really see what is the true emotion you're experiencing. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So even, we need to learn more in our older age and to better have these relationships.
Yes.
So you work with a lot of women, it sounds like.
Yes.
What are the things you see that we face more or need help with more? What are our tendencies or pitfalls beyond even just the self-silencing?
Oh, we.
Do we have enough time for that?
I would say I deal with women that struggle with toxic relationships. And when I say toxic, I think of being in a relationship with someone where you can't be yourself, where you are silencing yourself, where you can't feel anything anymore because you become so numb from all the chaos and the trauma in the relationship. And a lot of times there's codependency where you feel good and you stay connected to someone who's bad for you because you feel good by being needed by that person.
And there's two questions. I shouldn't ask two questions at one time. I know. I think they're simple answers. So one, this could both be personal and or professional. Like doesn't have to just be husband or, a spousal partner relationship.
Absolutely.
And two, when I hear that, sometimes I think, oh, we're talking about like loud and, something that you would see from the outside, be like, oh, that's a toxic relationship because it's out there, it's loud. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but this could be subtle, where it's just, quiet manipulation or quiet, and I'm not a therapist, so please put the right terms here, narcissism, whatever it might be, but it could also be something that's subtle and quiet that's toxic.
Absolutely. Gaslighting.
Gaslight.
Right? Gaslighting. So if you have a partner, whether, like you said, it could be a boss. Bosses are gaslighters too. Our friends are gaslighters. Family can be gaslighters. But if you have a person in your life that makes you question yourself, makes you question, did something really happen? Or did you really say something? Or did they say something? So they're putting doubt into your mind about what the truth is, but it's used as a tool of manipulation. Now, sometimes that doubt happens naturally, but when it's used for manipulation, that's gaslighting. Makes sense?
And so they're manipulating you to either get what they want or get something out of you or keep you under control.
Yeah, it's a sense of control. And there are gaslighters who are also narcissists, but there are gaslighters who do not fit the traits of narcissism. And we throw that word out a lot. They're a narcissist. Well, there is an actual diagnosis for that. And most people that's said about, they don't fit the diagnosis. But there are people who are gaslighters because they need to have some sense of control over someone else because they don't have control over themselves.
What are other signs of, that toxic environment?
Yeah, toxic environment. So if you think about, I'm trying to give you a good example. If you see someone who, let's say it's a coworker. So if you see that coworker who their behavior has changed in some way, where maybe they started out very bubbly and very sweet and very attentive to everyone else around them, and you see a shift in their behavior, maybe they start to get quiet or they're coming in late or they're not showing up at all anymore. Something has happened in that person's life. And sometimes it's because of a toxic relationship. They have a toxic partner, or maybe there's a toxic family member that they're dealing with and they're just overly stressed out about whatever they're dealing with. And so they tend to pull back. And I think in moments like that, we will bring up other ideas of what could be going on in that person's life. But do we ever ask them, like, are you in a healthy relationship? We never ask that question. We're afraid to involve ourselves in someone else's relationship. But sometimes we need to, because we need to let that person know, hey, what you're dealing with, that's not healthy. What you're dealing with, that's toxic. This could lead to something worse if you don't get out now. And that's part of what I do, is helping people, mostly women, identify not just red flags, but to also identify what is good, because we don't always see the good either, right? And we can confuse sometimes what seems to be good, but really it's toxic. So for example, love bombing. So when someone's receiving tons of gifts and it feels good, but they don't see the manipulation behind it, right? They don't see that that person is doing that to have control over them. and then they pull it away at some point, and that's where it feels toxic and there's confusion. So I think when we think of toxic environments or toxic relationships, there's an element of confusion. There's an element of you've changed yourself for that person, or you've changed yourself to stay safe in the relationship. And if you can't talk about it, that's also toxic.
Yeah, and I think something you said earlier, sort of not being your true self, lessening yourself. People talk about putting that mask on, signs of this is not a good environment, not a healthy environment.
Yeah. And I think the most confusing part is they're not always bad. It's not always like this. And that's when people stay, and they stay too long because it's not always bad. But anyone that's experienced abuse and they tell you their story, they'll tell you, well, they weren't always like this. No abuser comes out when you first meet them and they're just initially abusing you, right? They're wearing a mask too. They're not revealing their true self until they get comfortable. They can see that they can control you because they've used all these tactics for some period of time where they know they have you, and then they reveal who they really are. But by that time, when it hurts, when the pain is inflicted upon you, you're like, that doesn't make any sense. What's going on? Oh, they didn't really mean it. They just had a bad day. And you make excuses. Right. And then you end up staying because every time it happens, there is a reason for it. I did it because I was drunk. I did it because you made me jealous, or I did it for whatever reason, or I didn't know how to control myself. I'm sorry. Right. And you get stuck in this cycle of abuse.
How do people work through that or out of it? Or
education. They have to be made aware of what's toxic. They have to be made aware of the fact that this doesn't have to be your story. You can choose different. You chose this relationship, which some people might feel embarrassed by that, especially if they've had a string of toxic relationships. Like, I keep doing this to myself. I keep choosing this type of person, but they don't know how to not choose that type of person. They are attracted to what they know. So until they learn something better, they're going to keep choosing that type of person in their life. And that shows up in all forms of relationships. But I think one thing that helps is being surrounded by healthy people, having examples of healthy dynamics, healthy friendships, healthy marriages, healthy partners, healthy bosses. People that can show you this is the real thing and what you have is not.
Yeah, and it goes back to your story of I grew up with my mom. I didn't know what a relationship was, having a man in the life, et cetera. And so I read a lot and listened to radio stations.
Yeah, I listened to other people's trauma to recognize I don't want that. So if this is bad, this is the bad stuff. And yes, I did experience some of those bad things. I experienced domestic violence. I experienced multiple unhealthy relationships because I thought I could help those people, right? I have such a big heart. I'm like, oh, I have empathy. I can care for you and it's going to make you better. I was fooling myself, right? But I also look back at those relationships I was in that people saw me in that didn't say anything. They just let it happen. They didn't say, that's bad, right? That's toxic. But if I did have someone in my life that could call it out and show me what was healthy, I probably would have ended those relationships sooner. So I think that's our role as people who are healthy. Hey, that's wrong. Stop doing that. You don't have to do that. You can have better. You just have to find it in other places. Yeah.
Of all the people that you've worked with, helped, or through the podcasts or the different things, do any stories stick out to you where, you're like, wow, I really made an impact here. I was able to help that person.
There are many single moms that come into my office, or if I meet them online, that share their story of how broken they are. And they never had an opportunity to share their story until they found me as their therapist, where in that initial intake session, they're able to tell me so many details about their life and break down in that moment and then realize I only cried here with you because I felt safe. I felt seen, and I really want to get some help. And when I hear stories of single moms that have never had support, that were being abused by their child's father, that were on the verge of losing their jobs, losing housing, like really broken people. And they're good people. They're hard workers. They're good moms, right? They are also successful, but they're in such toxic places in their life that, yeah, they almost lost their job because of all the abuse they were dealing with, and they stopped showing up to work, right? When I hear those stories, it reminds me of why I created She Matters for my dissertation, because I knew that it wasn't just me. I knew that there were women that needed to hear that they weren't alone. And I think that's the biggest thing, is helping people realize that they're not alone. Because when we feel alone and we're experiencing mental health issues and depression, that's when suicidal thoughts start to rise. And one of my life's goal is to save a life. So for me, if I impact just one person, I know I was here and I did my purpose.
Yeah, and you had mentioned this before. I think, we often get in our own heads and think it's just me. I'm the only one going through this. I don't want to admit it. Yet the more that we can share our stories and show that, we're all out here, we're all making mistakes. Yeah. No one's perfect. And hopefully that helps somebody else see that, it's okay to open up and ask for help and get help.
Yeah.
And get to the right people who can help educate, help protect, see, help you work through, sift through what you're going through. The spin probably that's in your head and in your heart.
Yeah. And I encourage people that they don't feel like they need to be a therapist, but they still want to help, is to create their own support groups. You don't have to be a professional to start a support group, because your support group can start from your own experience and you navigating how to get better and be a better person where you can help the next person.
So maybe even, talk about, I think I heard that over the weekend, women were talking about how do we pour back into ourselves and or help each other as women, moms. And that might be that, moms get together, and if your kids are similar ages, they go play outside or whichever. And, you're just having fun together and supporting each other. It could be that you bring a meal over to someone, or you offer to watch their kid for a little while, whatever the case may be. Even if it's something so small that you may feel so small, could be so big to the other person.
Yeah.
A smile, a lending hand, just even a question of, how are you?
And giving an honest answer of that. That's the other key part. Yeah.
And I think, releasing that feeling of, but I don't want to burden the other person, or I don't want to come across as like negative or toxic by talking about this. Like, if it's the right person, the right setting, like they want to know because they want to be able to help. So you share.
I tell my clients all the time, you don't have the power to tell someone that you're a burden. You don't get to decide that. They get to decide how much they can hold for you. So you can't stop yourself from asking for help because you think you're going to be a burden on someone else.
That's some good advice. I think we've had somebody on the podcast before say, something to the effect of, don't decide for me, or don't prevent me from helping you.
Oh, yeah.
Like, don't take that from me.
Absolutely.
Which is hard to hear and to let go as a woman and mom. Along your way, you've mentioned, building your business. Even in several months ago, your accounts were hacked. You had to start over.
Oh, yes.
In that mode, what have you learned? What advice can you share?
I remember before that happened, that the TikTok ban happened, right? And I remember seeing videos, because I'm on Instagram all the time, just scrolling. Don't judge me. But I remember seeing people crying about that, and they lost their accounts and all that work they put into it. And then my accounts were hacked. And I remember the first thing I recognized that I felt was sadness. And most of it was sadness because of my Facebook account, which was my main account that I had since 2007. So all of my memories, with my son and my connections I built from, just college classmates or high school. You know how you meet people and I'm like, oh, let's connect on Facebook. I had so many connections there. And I lost all of my accounts that were connected to to that main account. So all of my Facebook accounts, personal and professional, all my Instagram accounts, personal and professional, were gone. And if you try to Google me, you couldn't find it. And at first I was sad, but over time I started to realize that was just a blessing because it helped me. It was like a fresh start. I was able to decide who do I want to show up as on social media. Not that, who I am here, this is who I am every day. I think people that know me, like, this is me. I'm real and raw all the time. But how do I want to present myself in a way that I could help specific people? So looking at rebranding, and it was just an opportunity to rebrand. And so I did relaunch. I have my YouTube channel, The Real Dr. Leslie. That didn't go away, thankfully. And so I started posting more on there. And I think that gave me a wider audience. I don't really know who watches my content, and I don't post to get views. I literally post just for memories because I feel like I want to remember what I've done, because I do so much and time just passes so fast as you get older. I'm like, I don't remember what I did last week, but I have a video about it. I can go back and watch that. And so I use social media for that purpose, but I also know that the things that I put out are purposeful, that I hope whoever hears it or sees it, that it does impact their life in some way.
From a business standpoint, you mentioned earlier, you can't do everything. Mm-hmm. You need to ask for help and or mentorship. Don't stop yourself from whatever reason, whether it's somebody who's more successful, you're afraid to reach out to them.
Yeah.
What are those things that you've overcome or you've learned that has helped you to be a better entrepreneur, business owner?
What have I learned about that? I'm still learning.
Well, that's the thing, right? If you really want to be successful in life, you better constantly be learning.
I think I've learned, there's a lady named Cody Sanchez. I found her on Instagram, and she just reminds me just from her video content that you have to keep pushing forward. And so whatever idea you have, capitalize on that. So do it now. Don't do it later. And I have so many ideas. I've written out ideas since I was a little girl that I still have my journals from 5th grade, but I'm always dreaming. I've always been a dreamer, probably because I was an only child. That's all I could do. It was just, talk to myself. But I've learned to write things down and put it out there so I can see it every single day. So I do make a vision board every year. I've been doing that for the last 8 years. And it's in my room. I wake up, I see it. When I'm getting ready to go, I'm looking at it. At the end of my day, I'm looking at it. And it's just a visual reminder of where I'm telling myself I'm going to go. And it's a decision I'm making for me. And that's one thing I learned is you have to choose your own path. You don't follow a path that someone chose for you. Because if you're walking in someone else's path in their shoes, it's not going to feel right. So you have to do what's best for you.
Yeah, go back to putting on that mask
Mm-hmm.
and not being your true self.
Yeah.
You won't find your true joy, your play, and your success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love the idea of the vision board, even the visual of it, because there may be so much that we have in our heads of what we want to achieve and what that life looks like. But I think seeing it is a different thing. Even you mentioned earlier the choosing a word every year. What's your word for this year?
Refinement, which is funny that I lost all my accounts and I had to refine myself. I'm like, Lord, that happened very early this year. You got me started right away with that word.
Let's be very careful with the word we choose for 2026.
Absolutely. Honestly, so this is June, right? We're halfway through the year. And so many things have happened that fit that word where I'm like, I didn't ask for that, Lord, but, I'll take it.
As we, get closer to the end of our time together, I think about if people want to work with you, find you, and listen to you? Because every Tuesday, right, you're out there on social media.
Yeah.
How do people find you, and who's the right fit that you could have a great impact for?
That's a great question. Who's the right fit? I would say the right fit is anyone that is in a space where they want to have a healthy relationship. I don't care if it's man or woman or child or teen. I think anyone that's striving to be healthy for themselves and healthy in a relationship, that's who I need to work with. But you can find me online. So my website is therealdrleslie.com. I'm on Instagram as The Real Dr. Leslie. That's my new account. That's also my YouTube channel. And you can find me on LinkedIn at Dr. Leslie Davis. But you mentioned going live on Tuesdays. So I'm also a content creator for a mental wellness app called Cadre, CADRE. And it's an amazing space. So if you are just wanting to connect with people for mental wellness, whether you're a caregiver, whether you're a single mom, if you're someone who has a child with autism, or you're an entrepreneur, you dealt with addictions, or you're a caregiver of someone with addictions, Cadre is a space where you can connect with people that share their own stories. They are vetted. We are professionals. Some of us are actually like licensed professionals. Some of us are just professionals because we've had life experience and we can show up in that space. And so I go live every Tuesday at noon Central Standard Time for a coffee chat with Dr. D.
All right. Like you said, we can find you out there on the different LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, all the different channels. See your new rebranding. See Eva Empowered. And work on continuing to build our relationship. I love what you said there, even if you're building a better relationship with yourself.
Yes.
Because often I think that's where we probably really need to start before we can have better relationships with others. We need to have a better relationship with ourselves.
Absolutely.
And, listen to all the good information and education that you have out there for us along with others. So I appreciate you sharing your story with us today, being so open and vulnerable. I always learn so much, and appreciate your appreciation for us putting on this podcast, because that is our intent, is to really spotlight others who are doing great things, who can share, I think, love, light, and learning out in the world. So, Dr. D, yes. I love saying that. Thanks for coming along the journey with us and for sharing today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
This concludes another episode of the She Lift Project podcast. To hear more episodes of the show, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And to learn more about our mission of helping women reach higher levels of success, visit SheLiftProject.com and sign up to receive the latest news, ebooks, videos, and more.